come in, come in. Come in. I'm just lighting up. Have a seat. Well, I thought I'd read you something a little different today. And none of these Sherlock Holmes pipes. So, as you know, I love C.S. Lewis, and I write and speak about him a bit. And one of the things that's happening in Lewis scholarship at the moment is a real sort of rediscovery and emphasis on his Irish background, and specifically his having come from being born in Belfast and grown up there. And I've been to several conferences in Belfast about all of that and the bits of scenery and everything that and he lived in a wonderful house called Little Lee, which is now in private ownership. I've sort of seen the outside of it. Anyway, I happened to meet an author there at this conference with whom I had this connection. That is a woman called Judith McCoy. So she and I both contributed to a book that Rabbit Room published called The Lost Tales of Galahad. We each wrote a Galahad story. So I was at this dinner in Belfast, happened to be sitting next to her and talking about Lewis and Belfast and also about Arthuriana. And she said, oh, well, you know, I've written a children's book about C.S. Lewis's boyhood, in which I imagine him making friends with a young, you know, Lewis was born in, his father was a lawyer, he was very comfortably off, lived in a very nice house, and it's called Little Lee, but it's quite a big house. But Judith had imagined Lewis being able to make friends with a young lad, working class Belfast lad, whose mother works as a sort of cleaner at the big house at Little Lee, and sort of imagines their friendship. So she gave me a copy. In fact, this is an advanced copy. I think it's just come out this month. And it's charming. But actually underneath the sort of charm is quite a sharp book. Because, you know, the sort of middle classes of Lewis's type, and for that matter his actual friend in Belfast, Arthur Greaves, or they were very comfortably off, but servants were really the only point of connection for them between the working class people of Belfast, who had far fewer opportunities, but of course had their own rich family traditions and storytelling and everything else. And of course it was a nurse, who, Lizzy, an Irish girl who first told the Lewis boys all the sort of magical stories of Ireland. So they got some of their love of mythology through that channel, as well as, you know, from reading books. Anyway, it's great fun, this book. And Lewis, of course, called himself Jack or Jack, so he's that character here. And anyway, I was reading it, and there's a rather lovely bit where she imagines the two boys playing around ideas and themes of Arthur and Arthurian things. And she describes a child's play really well, the way you get into it, the way the surroundings are transformed as you imagine it, as the enchanted forest or whatever. And it suddenly took me back to the way I played. You know, my love of Arthuriana really goes back to my childhood and my mother telling me the stories. And then I would play them, I would act them, I would become them, I would imagine I was Galahad or whatever. And so I particularly had wooden swords that I played with and shields and things like that, so I could dress up as a knight. And I'm imagining that probably Davy, the young son of a Belfast shipyard worker, and Jax, described playing here, are about the age I would have been. And of course there's a semi-tragedy going on in the background, because Mrs. Lewis's mother, features quite a bit. And of course we know that she's got cancer and that she's becoming more and more ill and that she's going to die. And she's trying to keep that from the boys. And so there's this sense, and Davy in his way also has to deal with various tragedies. But the play is, you know, is really beautifully described. So Davy, Jax and his mother wandered through the ruins of the castle, the once grand hall now carpeted with grass and roofed with blue sky. The high walls clung to the cliff like limpets, though some had long ago fallen to the sea, thundering below. Mrs. Lewis had bought the boys 2 wooden swords in the wee shop nearby, and Davy twirled the hilt in his hand. He tried to imagine, they're in a ruined castle on the coast there, he tried to imagine who could live in such a place. A king in his court, perhaps. Someone like King Arthur and his knights. "En garde!" Jax laughed and stepped back from Davy, wooden sword wobbling in his fist. Davy spun round, caught off guard a little. "Are you a knight?" he asked, returning to Jax, "or the king?" "You're the Prince of Dunluce, that's the castle," Jax declared. "And I'm a warrior, I'm a warring knight, comrade of Sir Nigel's, come to steal your castle." He jabbed the point of his sword towards Davy. Davy grinned and dodged Jack's blow while sweeping his sword in front of him. "Never!" "Careful, boys," Mrs. Lewis laughed. "This isn't a fight to the death, I hope." "Of course it is, Queen Flora," Jax proclaimed. Flora was his mother's name. "Of course it is, Queen Flora," Jax proclaimed, as their swords rapped against each other. While parrying Jack's lunges, Davy saw Mrs. Lewis wince as she tucked her skirts round her and sat down on a grassy mound. Perhaps she's just feeling tired, like Jax had said. He felt a pressure on his chest and, looking down, saw the point of Jack's sword against his shirt. Davy groaned theatrically and crumpled to the ground. "You win, Prince Jax," he said with dying breath. "To the dungeons with you!" Jax raised his arms in triumph and smiled at his mother. So then they go off, and there's another little bit where they come to some woods along the river Lagan. The boys, as she paid the driver, the boys ran ahead along the lane until they came to a looming archway carved and ancient. "This is the magical forest," Jax whispered, as they passed under it and entered the woods, "where the magicians and enchantresses live." Davy's heart skipped a beat. A magician, like Merlin in King Arthur's court, the one in Mark Twain's book. As they followed the path winding downwards, he inspected the woods for any sign of a dark cloak or the point of a sword. The sound of burbly water greeted them at the bottom of the hill. Davy peered between the trees where a river ran swiftly over rocks and pebbles. Rays of sunshine filtered through the branches of beech and oak trees, making the water sparkle and glint. One branch reached right down until it nearly touched the water with its green lace. Mrs. Lewis padded over to a stone jutting out from the river bank. "You go on, boys. I'll sit here and rest." "All right, Mother," Jax called over his shoulder, already picking his way along the roots and rocks. "We'll meet of the riverside path, wooden sword in hand. We'll meet you back here." Davy followed, keen to explore. He'd walked along the Lagan in Belfast lots of times, but he'd never been to a stream in a wood before. "We must go to their aid," Jack called over his shoulder, walking faster now. "Who?" Davy called from behind. "The creatures of the forest kingdom," Jack said. "They're under a spell." Davy's heart leapt at the thought of more make-believe. He checked in his pocket. The squirrel's gnarly acorn was still there. He ran to catch up with Jax. "Onwards," he yelled, waving his sword in the air. They made their way along the river side by side, leaping over tree roots and launching themselves off flat rocks. Ahead the path meandered round a small stone structure. When he reached it, Davy stopped and put his hand against the rough wall, a little out of breath. "What's in here?" With a grin and a wave of his sword, Jax turned. "Mustn't delay." Davy shook his head and laughed at his friend's eagerness. A set of stone steps curved round the outside of the little house, so Davy climbed them up to the roof. From the top he could see the stream and the path behind them. "To the rescue!" Davy heard his friend shout, but he couldn't see Jax anywhere. Davy leaned over the parapet. Was that a roar of flame from a phoenix or the rush of a river? Suddenly, from beneath the grotto, Jax appeared, running full tilt along the path. He wiped and jabbed his sword in front of him, just like a knight. Davy wondered who else might be charging alongside Sir Jax. Perhaps Sir Lancelot and Galahad from King Arthur's court. Davy pictured a whole army of knights, all carrying weapons, all fellow soldiers with the boy. One glorious brigade. Davy's chest swelled with courage and strength. This was what he wanted more than anything else. Even if others thought pretending was nonsense, none of that mattered. Lifting his sword, Davy swung down the steps and onto the path. He ran as fast as he could, soon catching up and mingling with the multitude of warriors. He whooped and hollered as he raced after Jax, his heart filling with the joy of battle. Ahead, Jax raised his sword again, and Davy thought it glinted with silver. I think that's a wonderful evocation of the mix of realism and magic and all these things, and I remember playing just like that. And of course, as I do. Lewis had a lifelong interest in all things Arthurian. I wrote the chapter in the end on the conclusion of a whole book about the Inklings and Arthur. And so it's lovely to think that he is a contemporary writer, reimagining the imagination of Lewis. It's always an interesting phenomenon when an author becomes a character in somebody else's book. I always rather like that. So anyway, I thought I'd just give you a little taste of it. It's called Giant, and it's quite fun to read. I mean, books for clearly a book for children, but good books for children are always highly readable by adults. Anyway, thanks for dropping round. Cheers.